the post-digestive effect, or known as the Vipaka. It's how the taste of the natural substance changes after digestion and cooking, hence how it influences the doshas, the physiology in the long term. And I think this is important to understand when we come back to that word rasa, that it didn't just mean taste, it meant essence. And here again, we have different classifications of vipak, different guna categories, the way in which they describe it, depending on what ancient text we're looking at here. So the main one that's used within Charak Samhita, and that's the ancient classical text of Ayurveda, probably one of the most famous and most influential on a lot of modern day Ayurveda, that they use a taste analogy where it's still sweet, sour, and pungent. So there's 3 different vipaks, not 6, 3 that could take place. Whereas Sushruta, again, he uses a different system here. Sushruta gives the post-digestive taste. Here we're looking at Vipaka here, heavy or a light quality. Really, he's looking at after metabolism, does it help to increase the body's tissues? Heavy. Or after metabolism, does it decrease the body's tissues? Light. So we're looking at the long-term effect on the body's tissues is largely what Vipaka refers to. We always have Charak and his sweet, sour, and pungent. And he's saying, does it increase the body's tissues? Sweet. Does it slightly increase the body's tissues, but possibly influence fermentation and maybe a bit heating? Sour. Tends to mainly increase the fluid tissues of the body, sour, rather than sweet will increase the heavier tissues of the body as well. And then pungent stimulates metabolism and decreases the body's tissues. So to summary, we've got the Sushruta, heavy, is very closely associated with the sweet. And then we've got the light is very closely associated with the pungent that's available there. So I really emphasize this. I like a lot of what Sushruta does. He simplifies things and potentizes them sometimes. When it comes to the post-digestive effect of something, the most important is, does it build the tissues or does it reduce the tissues? So if we were doing a detox program for people, we'd want to look at foods and substances that have a long-term light or a long-term pungency as their properties, because they will help to reduce the tissues. Some examples of that might be like chili, onion. Onion would have a long-term sweet and long-term heavy to it. The ginger has a long-term sweet to it. So these, even though they're pungent in their first taste, they help to nourish and build the body's tissues up. So if you use ginger with different foods that were nourishing, that were building, these could help vata and pitta more easily because of their long-term vipak of sweet or heavy. Whereas if you were to use a lot of black pepper as an example, as your pungent taste, they're both pungent, is their first taste. Black pepper in the long run is light. In the long run is the pungent drying vipak.
Okay, so it's even with amla, right? Like amla is like a sour or like it's, but after its post-digestive effect is sweet.
That's right.
So,
it helps to build the tissues through those properties. So even though it's a fruit that is generally light in its properties and easy to digest, its long-term effect is sweet, Vipaka post-digestive effect, or according to Sushruta, its long-term effect is heavy. So if it was heavy in its first effect, it would be heavy to the digestive system, hard to nourish and digest. But heavy as a post-digestive taste does not necessarily mean difficult to digest, like it normally would be as an early quality. So here, amalaki, helps to build up the body's tissues, and it's particularly fabulous for building the walls of the digestive tract. And that's why I use it in that formula we talked about before, the Apana Prana. It's also used within the classic Ayurvedic formula Chayavanprash. There's a large amount of the amla that's in there because it helps to nourish and build up the tissues of the body.
yes, amla is really good. because of its Vipaka, not because of its rasa, but because of its Vipaka.
Yeah, the more that we get counterbalancing tastes and qualities and virya, things that we normally wouldn't expect within a substance, they're often the ones that Ayurveda will consider as a superfood. Whereas in like a Western naturopathic sense, superfoods were the ones that were so extreme in some certain quality that they had like so much spirulina, the most minerals that you could possibly get, and the most amount of protein. Whereas in Ayurveda, exact opposite is true. They're like, oh, how is this substance the most neutral? How could someone eat it almost every day without it aggravating? As an example, the dominant taste within amalaki, is sour. And normally the sour taste would be heating. Yet the thermal effect, the virya of the sour taste for amalaki is actually to cool. It cools and slows down metabolism. Even though it's got this sour taste that would normally erupt the digestive juices, it slows and cools the tissues. The sour taste would normally have a post-digestive effect of sour as well, and yet in amalaki, its post-digestive effect is sweet and it helps to build the tissues overall. If we go into more detail about amalaki, it also has 5 of the 6 tastes. The only taste that it doesn't have is salty, and because it has so many tastes, again, it's more balanced, it's more neutral. So Ayurveda loves these foods that have sort of counterbalancing, opposing qualities to them. It's light and it's easy to digest, and yet its post-digestive effect is heavy and it helps build the tissues. These sorts of things, Ayurveda goes, yeah, wow, these are unique and special.
But things like that helps build the tissues, their action in the body would be more cooling then?
Tend to be, yes, such as rice is cooling, ghee is cooling. These things that tend to slow the metabolism a little bit tend to be better at building the tissues. Gokshura, tribulus, is cooling in its orientation. Vidari Kunda is cooling, Shatavari is cooling. These things all tend to
And neem
build
is
the
also
tissues
cooling,
easier.
right?
What was that?
Neem is also cooling.
Neem is also cooling, yet because its dominant taste is bitter, and then its post-digestive taste is also light or pungent. Now, this is again where you see like the Charuk classification here to sometimes be a little bit confusing, because neem doesn't have much pungency to it. It's got no warming properties to it, and yet its post-digestive taste is pungent, which really means reduces the tissues. At least my understanding of what I've discovered over Ayurveda over time really means reduces the tissues in its post-digestive taste. So in that regard, although neem is cold, the rest of its properties, its taste and its vipak, can tell you about its long-term effect of reducing tissues. Whereas if we had something that tasted sweet or sour as its first taste, or even sweet, sour, and salty as its first taste, there's more chance that it builds the tissues, as a generalization.
Because like this probably answers one of my first questions I asked you, like, how bitter, even though I'm Vata, but I cannot eat neem. Like, it has really aggravated my situation very badly. But like spinach and the vegetables that are bitter, so now it makes sense that their post-digestive taste or their vipaka or their guna, everything will determine how it will act in our body, not just a bitter taste of spinach.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, we ready for more?
Yes, please go ahead.
So the next piece is how it affects the dosha. Sometimes this is constitutional dosha, whether it's our Vata Pitta Kapha ratio inside our body constitution, what makes us unique in our body-mind makeup. But also this is the dosha of how it might influence a season as well, how it might be useful for a certain time of day. As an example, the pungent foods that have a lot more heating properties to them tend to increase pitta, and therefore they're not as useful in the middle time of the day, 10 to 2. They're not as useful in the hottest time of the year, around the summer, towards the end of summer. And they're not as needed within a hot, pitta, fiery constitution. So the dosha gives us now a relationship between the substance and the environment that the substance moves into. Whether that environment is a person, as it moves into a person, how might it affect their dosha, their disease tendency, or whether or not it's a time of day or a season, how might it affect the disease tendencies of those times of day, compared to pungent might be a fabulous taste to be able to use first thing in the morning when the kapha dosha is dominant. When we just wake up, there's more stagnation, heaviness, such as an example of having a ginger tea first thing in the morning. That would be a great practice that tunes into the natural dosha effect of the substance.
Yeah, that's why I heard that early morning one should avoid anything that is high in kapha, specifically milk, because a lot of people are giving like milk to kids early in the morning, and that's I've heard that's a terrible thing. It's a terrible time to
Especially
drink milk.
Ayurveda is very big about warming milk before giving it as well. So a classic modern day thing of like pulling cold milk out of a fridge, and a lot of the time it's pasteurized and homogenized as well, and particularly the homogenization part makes it very difficult to drink. So it's already difficult to consume and break apart. Then we're using cold, and then we put it on something like Wheat Bix, one of the heaviest grains that there is, or those wheat-made cereals. And of course we're getting allergies to milk and allergies to wheat because we made it so difficult to digest. So then our immune system needs to clean it up through the rest of the body.
That's what I think. Like a lot of the intolerance that has come about, like lactose and gluten and all of these things, I honestly feel that nature or the divine nature of God cannot make things for no purpose. Like wheat was made so that people can eat it. Like so the reason why people cannot eat and they're getting gluten intolerance is because of the way they have been eating something and the way the immune system has now, screwed up inside them because of how they ate. Like, yeah, because when you go to a store, you see so many people just take out a milk, chocolate milk or strawberry milk from the freezer, and they pay and they start drinking it. And that's, yeah, it's creating a problem. The reason why dairy is becoming a scary thing is because of the way it is being consumed, or even wheat or barley. People are finding it difficult. Some people is because of the way they are eating it, like you said, putting it in the milk, which is not the way.
Yeah, I agree. I think one part of good nutrition is sattva, looking for the most wholesome source of those foods, whether it's dairy, wheat, or other vegetables or various places. How can we get it in the most wholesome way that's beneficial for the planet? And another part of nutrition, and this comes under the Dravya Guna, this process here as well, the qualities of what you're receiving. But another part that's actually way more important as an entry level is how you are consuming those substances, how you're enhancing your being to be able to process life that comes to you. And with every one of my clients that has some form of digestive issues, I will first be looking at the 7 tips for drinking and the 7 tips for eating. It's a YouTube class that you'll be able to find on vitalitynow.co. Gori may be able to share the link in the show notes that are there. And that goes through that first foundation. It's like, oh, if you're not eating and drinking in this way, then you're just decreasing your metabolic force of the body, and that's going to make it harder to consume whatever you expose yourself to.
Yes, I think that would be a very interesting thing to watch for sure. Because Ayurveda is all about combination and how you do something. It's not just about eating something because it has this much vitamins, this much minerals, but it is also about how you're absorbing it. Like something like wheat that is very healthy. but it is becoming unhealthy. Or barley is considered very, very healthy in Ayurveda. Barley is a good thing, like, but people are moving to millets. Millets is equally good, but that does not defames barley. It's just that how people have, what people have eaten so far and how their immune system has become a problem for them.
Totally agree.
It's the combination.
Mm.
Yes, I think.
I'll continue with our next Dravya Guna.
Yes.
So after